Hello friends! Not sure if I've actually got my mic in anything like a good position. But here we are. Hello. Hello friends. How are we all doing? Yeah, the mic's kind of being awkward. I might be able to actually work with it here, but then it's in front of my face. It's probably fine here, right? It's probably just fine. You can hear. You can hear. I don't need to fuss over it. I definitely don't need to fuss over it. How are we, folks? How are people? We're going to be working on this today. I was supposed to be building some Night Lords today for a client, but I can't do that just yet. So I wanted something else productive to do with my day, and I thought to myself, well, I'm currently in the process of shooting this video about my sort of early impressions from owning a 3D printer, and as part of that video, it's kind of useful to me to have various bits of footage shot for like stuff that I've finished, stuff that I'm working on that relates to the 3D printer, and where's Basic Flash? Where are you? There. So like, I'll be mentioning this bust in that video. It's going to kind of come up in the video, and so I thought to myself, well, it won't hurt then to have the bust finished, so that when I'm talking about it, I kind of have a bit more of an ability to talk about it and actually demonstrate it as like a finished thing. So yeah, we're going to be just doing some work on this bust. I'm currently just getting some paint on the palette. Sort of my first priority. I'll show you some straightforward portraiture techniques and just chill and hang out together. Balnor, how you doing, mate? It's good to see you. So the first thing I want to start doing is just blocking in shadows. So I've chosen a dark green for this. You might be asking yourself, why have you chosen a dark green? Is that not a bit much? One of the things you kind of have to Amos. One of the things you kind of have to get your head around very early on with portraiture is that the colours that you think are present in skin are not the colours that are actually present in skin. Skin is like way more complicated than we think of it as being, and there will be a lot of cold tones present in skin, and the easiest way to kind of integrate those cold tones into the sort of, you know, pinks and browns that you definitely will be painting in your skin workups, I find, is to use green. Green just seems to be the best sort of starting point. So I really like green. There is a bit of, unfortunately, quite annoyingly, the drainage holes in this sculpt are still shedding a bit of isopropyl as I'm working on it. So the actual mounting plate will probably end up needing several cleanups to get rid of that. But for now I can just kind of combat that by holding it with some tissue like this. Hey Chris, I'm doing okay, yeah. I've been a bit of a busy boy lately, but you know, it's not really anything new. I'm having a good enough time with it. Yeah, I can't complain. How's things with you? One of the main things you're going to see here is a lot of layering. Birthday was lovely, yeah. Really nice. I felt far too spoiled by the end of it. I felt like I didn't even close to deserve all the nice treatment that I got. I mean, I've to be fair, MF, I've been making that comment myself, so if I get it, I deserve it. Yeah, this early sort of back and forth stage of a portrait is always one of the more interesting parts to me, just kind of establishing where you want different zones of colour to live. I really enjoy this part because it's very, it feels very kind of free form, you know, it feels very sort of loosey-goosey, no pressure. That's my kind of painting. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely gonna be a lot of that. That's gotta be good fun, Chris. It's gotta be good fun. I don't know if y'all can hear it or not, but the printer's actually running now. I don't know how much that's going to be picked up on streams. But hopefully it's not too loud. You got to teach Ruth to solder. Nice. That's a great skill to have at such a young age as well. So cool to have an opportunity to pick that up at such a young age. You can't hear the printer, that's good. Also, if the picture looks very dark, I've actually just messed with the exposure a little bit and brought it up because it looked so dark. But it is actually just that this just has a very matte undercoat on it and it's absorbing a lot of light at the moment. So I will, as it gets more colour on it, it will start to kind of be a bit more visible. But at the moment, it's just got a very matte black primer on it, and that's what's kind of making it so dark. It's not really something I can do too much about with the camera. That'll be fun. Filming gameplay is like, it's so involved. Like from an editing perspective, stitching it all together, it's so involved. Certainly compared to what I do, at least, you know, compared to just sort of stringing together tutorials, which is, relatively speaking, quite easy. Well, I managed to self-teach video editing, and you know, knowing how clever she is, I know, obviously she's only a young kid, but knowing how clever she is, like I think it will be obtainable for her. You know, as someone who has self-taught that skill, I think a child could potentially be taught it without too much trouble. I use HitFilm Express 4, or HitFilm 4 Express. And I use that actually because I find it to be the most user-friendly. It's not the most powerful, but I think, like, certainly for what I do, I don't necessarily need the most powerful, right? And I think that's probably true of a lot of people. Like, most people, to make the YouTube content they want to make, probably don't need something that's like professional grade, that's, you know, movie grade. Because at the end of the day, like, they probably don't have the camera equipment or the skills even to adequately harness that kind of power anyway. You know, your average YouTuber. Yeah, HitFilm I just found very easy to learn. Very, very easy to learn. I'll definitely have to see what I can do about it. Like, you see all the alcohol leaking out of the back of it, out of the drainage holes. Again, that's early learning things with a 3D printer. That's just kind of learning stuff that you don't necessarily instinctively think of. you're looking to pick one up, are you? Now that I have one, I very immediately understand a lot more of the levels of value to having one. There are certain things that are sort of quite hard to appreciate when you don't own one, and there's certainly been periods in the past where, like, my friends have picked them up and I've been like, I'm just not sure if I'm ready yet, you know, I'm just not sure if they do enough of the stuff that I want one for yet. Or I got a Mars 2 Pro, and yeah, I mean, to say that I'm impressed is an understatement. The user friendliness is like, in areas where you think it might be hard to use, it's actually surprisingly user friendly. But like, one of the main things that you just don't really think of, and that's actually super important, is understanding the resin itself, not the printer. And no one really tells you that, so that's going to kind of be probably an important underpinning of the video that I'm going to put out. Or certainly, you know, none of the places where I was sort of seeing advice were putting a lot of emphasis on how important it is to understand the actual resin more so than the printer. Because, like, the printers are you know, pretty fucking set up to be user friendly. They're pretty kind of, I'm always careful to use this word, but they're pretty optimized towards user friendliness. But like, the actual material that you're printing in has quite a drastic effect on how you need to do certain things. And if you don't understand that, you're going to get failed prints. So like, I've had 2 failed prints so far. The first attempt at doing this failed. Because I tried to print it solid, I didn't realise that you needed to put drainage holes in and hollow out stuff like this. Because of how, like, heavy it is. Basically, because it was solid, it just fell off the build plate midway through printing. And the other issue I had was once I then did make it hollow, I didn't put drainage holes in it because I didn't know that that was a thing. So this version had no drainage holes, but it did actually print successfully. It actually printed fine. But because it didn't have drainage holes, I then had to do a lot of extra faffing around to get all of the liquid resin out from the inside of it. It doesn't specifically matter like what resin you get, but you need to like look at, for example, different resins have like different amounts of recommended time to let the bottom layer cure before you actually start the print. Didn't know that, so you know, that was leading to prints not being as good as they should be. And like, didn't know that different resins kind of needed different amounts of exposure per layer, and that was something you needed to set up manually. Didn't know that. So like, there were definitely lessons learned the hard way. But like, you know, I've had 4 prints. I've done 4 prints and I've had 2 successes and 2 failures. And one of the main reasons that I've failed has just been not understanding the material, really. Not, you know, just doing something silly. And so now that I know that, it's way easier to, like, be more vigilant, pay more attention where it counts. Well, the Mars 2 Pro has like a carbon filter and a fan, so it kind of pulls the resin fumes through it, filters them, and then pumps it out the back. So between that and having a window open, I'm not finding it a problem. Interestingly, it's actually the fumes off the ISO that seem to bother me a lot more, which might just be a thing because I'm quite sensitive to alcohol anyway. But if anything, it's when I'm actually cleaning and the ISO fumes are getting in my face, that I'm being more bothered, if I'm honest with you. Yeah, the actual resin fumes don't seem to be bothering me. Like, I've had no headaches from them or anything like that. Yeah, precisely. Like, it's not as if I don't have masks. You actually get like a Rona mask with the printer. You get a couple of them. I did have my first sort of quality issue, I guess, with the product this morning. My first thing that sort of made me say, you know, that shouldn't really be happening. Over the first couple of days, I've been being a bit rough with the film on the bottom of the resin vat. Mostly out of like not really knowing that you needed to be super careful with it. Not sort of realizing how delicate it can be and how obviously it can affect print quality if it gets damaged. So, you know, mostly born out of ignorance. But I wanted to change it. And then you have to undo these like hex bolts in order to change the film. And the Allen key that they supplied sheared off in one of the hex bolts. So I've had to buy new vats, which, when I've only owned the thing for 2 days, definitely stung. I was pretty mad about that. But I've had to buy new vats just simply because the one vat that I have now has a hex bolt stuck in, like with a sheared off Allen key stuck in it. I don't have a drill that can delicately enough sort of get in there. And by the time I'd sort of bought the drill bits that I needed, you know, borrowed a drill off someone, it's just like, at this point you may as well just replace the vat. So that was like, yeah, that was a bit of a stinger. That definitely didn't feel good because, you know, it's very early days to have something, to have like an actual component of the printer breaking. Hey Felix. Yeah, I don't mind the smell of it. I wouldn't say that I like it, but it certainly doesn't bother me. The smell of it doesn't kind of upset me. But then I'm one of these weirdos that likes the smell of creosote and stuff like that, so, you know. Like, Chris, they're not going to do anything about that. It's a shared Allen key. Like, you know, as far as any company is concerned, that's user error. Like, they're just not going to do anything about it. And especially, like, I've dealt with enough Chinese manufacturers professionally in the past to know that, like, they don't tend to just carry UK stock of replacement parts. So, like, they just won't have a solution on hand to an issue like that. But, you know, like, at the end of the day, it's not the worst thing in the world, because what I learned as a result of that is actually that in terms of economy, like combined economy of time and money, it's probably cheaper to replace your VATs every couple of months than it is to replace your plastic anyway. Because the plastic's like 15 quid for 2 sheets, and the VATs are like 30 quid for two whole new VATs. So it's probably better practice to just replace the VATs, because they come with the plastic fitted when you buy the replacement ones. So it's probably just better practice to replace the VATs anyway and not worry about it. Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. I think, you know, if you sort of work out the time, the hassle, the effort, and the money, and kind of add that all together, just buying the replacement part is probably just the easiest way to get it sorted quickly without too much arseache. So that was what I went with. The thing is, you know, I'm not someone who looks at economy as being something that's purely a financial prospect. You know, I take my time and the amount of, you know, effort asked of me into consideration when I'm working out what something is worth to me. It really is one of my favourite things to spend time doing, painting skin tones. I'm such a fan of it. I don't get to do it enough with normal sort of, 28 to 32 mil scale, because just a lot of what I get commissioned to paint just doesn't have like normal human skin tones, or doesn't have any skin tones at all. Warhammer's got a lot to do with that, Warhammer's just one of those things, like a lot of stuff just is wearing big chunky armor. We're still just establishing simple tones at this stage, though, so this is kind of the very laid back part of painting a portrait. It's kind of nice. It's just, it's really just sort of giving everything a home and. It's all very low pressure. Yeah, I mean, you can already see sort of zones of light and shadow starting to appear now. It's becoming a thing. I definitely feel like I don't do enough of this sort of thing. I feel like bust painting is something that I should do it more. I like doing it. I want to do it more. I just never do it more. Finished being Wet and Wild yet? I think it has. Okay, let's get some sunny skin tone out. This is where things start to get interesting, because we're getting into like really bright colours now with a lot of saturation. I find it easier to get more interesting looking skin on a bust. Like, it's a lot easier to express nuance when you've got all that extra space to work with. And that's kind of what, if you're painting a bust, that's kind of what you should be thinking about, is like, what am I going to do to utilize this gift of all this extra space? Because that's really the main advantage of painting a bust over a smaller scale miniature, or anything larger scale, really. That's kind of the big thing that it brings to the table. And so if you're not actively doing something to take advantage of that, then like why are you painting that larger scale in the first place, you know? And so asking yourself questions like that can kind of be a good way to just set yourself up for understanding the processes that you want to be using and the types of applications that you want to be sort of pushing towards, if that makes sense. You know, like if you notice here, I'm not being shy at all with the texture. Like I'm more than happy for there to be texture present. And that's just because we're painting this skin to kind of look, I want it to look like a portrait, you know, I want it to look like a painted portrait. And so expression through use of strokes is kind of really important to 2D portraiture. That's kind of a big part of how you capture the human element, as it were. And so what I'm thinking to myself here is not treating it like painting a miniature, but treating it like painting a portrait. And were I painting a portrait, I wouldn't be scared to incorporate texture. And so as such, it should be present. So what I really like about texture when you're painting skin, the thing that particularly attracts me to incorporation of texture is that you can kind of trick the eye into having the impression of like all the little imperfections in the skin being shown, and you can sort of make the viewer consider that, you know, the skin may not be perfect, that it may have dimples and you know, swollen pores and that kind of thing. And being able to express that sort of stuff, you know, you can't do that at kind of heroic scale. That's something you only start to become able to do when you get into the larger scale. I think you also sort of maybe learn a bit more about light when you paint at the larger scales. It's a little bit easier to appreciate light play and to maybe envisage it and be able to apply it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of advantages to this scale, especially just from a learning perspective. I would always recommend that anyone who wants to take mini painting a little more seriously, you know, either wants to, you know, look at it potentially from a professional perspective, or just wants to, you know, actually sort of dedicate some serious personal growth time to expanding their abilities as a mini painter. Like, if that's the position you find yourself in, then I think looking at stuff like this is a really good way to facilitate growth in some of the important areas. And that's not to say that, like, hey Chad, how you doing? It's not to say that, like, it's a catch-all. The downside to working on this is that I think it also exposes a lot of inadequacies in people's painting. But I think if you want to give yourself a solid platform from which to learn certain key skills, especially light management, texture, you know, the more sort of expressive side of painting, then I think this is definitely a really good place to investigate. The thing is, I don't love competitive painting. That's the problem. I think in order to paint competitively, you have to have a very specific love for competitive painting. I don't think you can just say, I like painting miniatures, I'm good at painting miniatures, I'm gonna enter a competition. Because I think competitive painting requires such sustained discipline and commitment to the outcome, and it requires such thick skin to be able to, you know, accept that you didn't perform as well as you thought you could, and stuff like that. And those are all things that, you know, if you have the mindset for it, then that's great news. But if you don't, those things can really break you down and push you away from something that you otherwise love. And that's kind of been my experience whenever I've looked at the competitive side of painting in the past. I've always just found too many pitfalls there to demotivate me from painting at all. Write and report streaming of AOS games. Not the worst place to find yourself, I guess. Right, before I go any higher with any of this now, I'm going to just start to pull back down on some of it. I just want to work my transitions a touch and sort of find a bit of the colour range in some of the areas of the skin here. So just kind of switch in mode for a minute. We will go back up and start highlighting higher than this. This isn't as bright as things are going to get. You can tell this is still pretty dark. But like, there's got to be a bit of back and forth so that you can just kind of blend stuff through nicely and, you know, make sure that everything looks clean and considered and done with purpose. One of the things I really like about painting at this scale, actually, something that I'm sort of being reminded of as I'm doing what I'm doing now, is glazing at this scale is just so much more forgiving. Like, it really doesn't punish you so instantly if you overload your brush, things like that, you know. Whereas obviously at the smaller scales, if you have even a little bit too much watery paint on your brush when you go in for a glaze, you can really make a mess. And because you've got so much surface area to cover here, it just doesn't tend to be the issue. See, like there, my brush was well overloaded, but it just didn't matter. I just pulled it down into the beard and it was as if it never happened. See what might actually... Can I get this under the camera? There you go. That gives you a bit of a nicer view of what I'm doing, doesn't it? Hey Underdog, how you doing, mate? Hey Joe. How are you, Joe? You feeling any better? Get off. Yeah, for sure, man. For sure. It's a rotter. Like, stuff like that definitely doesn't happen very often, so, you know, it's very hard to build up any kind of thick skin toward it. You know, it's just one of those things that on the rare occasions that it occurs, it's just going to piss you off. There's really not a lot you can do about it. But I do feel for you. It's kind of brutal when it's, especially when it's multiple miniatures as well that get damaged. It's like always a bad feeling. very, very little of this highlight colour on the dark side of the moon, so something we just need to bear in mind. We can use a little bit of it, like the odd, you know, sympathetic reflection here and there and stuff like that. Definitely doesn't hurt. But if we're trying to create the impression that there's a strong light source on one side, which we are, then obviously we just need to be really careful to be conservative enough. I remember that very well. Yeah, it's really funny. It's really, really funny. That's a good shout. Oh. Woke up today with a stiff neck again, so I'm needing to kind of shake off the aches, but. Starting to look nice already. Yeah, I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, oh my god, these guys, I remember these guys from the American football videos. They've done fucking Game of Thrones. This will be so funny. And I was not let down. I was not let down at all. That's nice. It might be a bit too bright. I can bring that down. Do you think they should make iPhones for babies? I can't say that I actually can remember quotes from it, so you've obviously watched it a number more times than me, Chad, but I do think it's pretty rad that you can quote it. I am a fan of quoting TV shows and movies and stuff like that. This is an area you've got to be really careful. Like around his earlobe here, I'm going to be picking up some redness. Like if you look at my earlobes on this side, you see you've got a mixture of like bright tones and redness in there. We've got to make sure that we represent that well. That sort of quickly kind of shifting tone. So you've got to be really careful to be sparing with your bright highlights and, you know, position them nicely. Hello, Mugs. Looking a bit busty today. Lollers. You meme lord. How are you, Mugs? Are you doing well? Again, that might be an area where I have to do just a little bit of deadening off. This is why we apply and adjust and apply and adjust. And you ain't done till you're done, buddy. And again, with this like really bright highlight color, you want to be very, very minimal on your dark side. You want to have almost none of it on your dark side. Oh wow, you're spending your lunch break here, mate. Are you sure that's what you want for yourself? Just settle all this down now. Filter off some of those highlights just to calm them a little. So we still need to get like a really desaturated highlight in somewhere near the top as well. So we've got to be careful not to have these like really burning, blazing yellow highlights that then end up going really sort of jarring and weird looking when we desaturate over them. You know me so well. It is nice to have the company today, I have to say. It's one of the things I like about the Monday stream. I always tend to, I don't know what it is, but I always have this sort of slightly lonely kind of melancholic feeling on a Monday. And I've definitely been finding that tends to be one of the days when I really want to stream, because it sort of helps combat that to a degree. Just pulled up this cheek here a little bit because it was just unbalancing a bit too much. It might have been a bit subtle what I was doing there, you may not have caught it, but I just sort of ran in some mid-tone just to bring up the sort of overall value of that area. And just continue to work it in now. I'm just kind of pushing paint around, you know. Oh, Salmon Sarnie. Someone's doing all right, isn't he? Bloody Salmon Sarnie. Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it is. I think it also sort of threw me a little bit that I kind of, all weekend I've kind of known clearly what I was going to come back to today, and then that's not been what I've ended up coming back to. I've had to sort of adjust my plans. Which is like, it's not a problem, it doesn't upset me, but it does kind of, it throws my my working week a little bit into disarray. But I managed to snap out a quick video this morning, which is on early access if you're a patron. So if you're a patron, then just head to the Patreon homepage and you'll see a post for early access to that. And I've got a few sort of backup projects. I may be a coffee mug, but I got standards. Yeah, I've got a few sort of backup projects as well on the go. That, you know, things like this that I can sort of audible into without any preparation needed. Because this is for a video that's like not coming out for ages yet. Or, well, I say not coming out for ages. It's probably coming out next week, actually, thinking about it. Thinking about how it'll end up falling. But it's not a painting tutorial. I want to make a video that's basically a kind of my first impressions after getting a 3D printer. You know, what I sort of think about the technology, what it's like to use, that kind of shit. Because I like to consume that kind of content, so you know, it never hurts to make a bit of what you like to consume every now and again. So I want to run something like that out, and having this painted for that video is just kind of, it will just make that video a little bit nicer, you know, to be able to show something as that's been taken all the way through. Juiced, you're glitching like crazy. That doesn't sound ideal. That does not sound like what one wants. Yeah, Joe's right as well, you know what he's saying. The Discord is sick. It's one of the best perks of the Patreon. It is getting busy in there now as well. Like, I'm loving it. It's getting to the point where it's like, it's not like overwhelmingly busy, like, you know, the huge Discords that you'll sometimes find yourself in. But it's like busy enough that there's always someone to chat to and something to chat about. You know, it's kind of hit that really nice point now. So now we're doing more sort of micro adjusting. We're just kind of working into areas and filtering colors mostly. Not really doing too much with value here. Odd little bits perhaps, but mostly focusing on hue. Yeah, I mean, you know, when you create something like that, you always hope it's going to get to that point where people are using it as like their place that they like to hang out and socialize. Like, that's always the hope. But you certainly never assume that that's going to happen, you know. So if it does, it's a very nice feeling for, you know, for me as the guy that put it together. It definitely doesn't help that we've got Mossy now helping on the sort of raw admin side as well. That's like made some huge improvements to the server. Like in terms of functionality and stuff, some of the sort of features that we now have that we didn't have before. Just trying to bring a touch more redness into the upper part of the cheek here. It's just getting a little bit too desaturated. And what I'm mostly doing is void blending, if you're wondering how I'm actually approaching it from a technical point of view. No worries, Mugs. Take care. Have a good day at work. Yeah, that and I think one of the ones that's going to maybe like low-key start to become way more useful is the region tagging. I think at the moment, like, people are still kind of getting used to the fact it exists, but I think the region tagging is going to become really handy. Just because it allows you to, like, if you want to, you know, trade some miniatures that you've got, then you can region tag your part of the world so that, you know, you're not getting people that are interested in them who you can't really afford to ship to, or who the price becomes prohibitive to if you were to ship to them. Yeah, that kind of stuff allows people to sort of not feel like they're wasting people's time, and making sure that the people who see certain posts are the people that those posts are most relevant to. Like, it's really rare these days that we have to use @everyone. And that's a really cool sign. The only time we have to use @everyone now is when I actually deliberately want to use it. Hey, Drowling, how are you, mate? Yeah, that's up and working, yeah. That feature is live. Back into Caliban green here. Just fixing some of the cold distribution in the skin. I've always preferred this method of painting skin, where you sort of just jump back and forth a lot and just kind of do things as you spot them, instead of going too sort of method with it. And the reason I really like this approach is just because you can kind of just focus in and look at what the skin needs as a whole, and make sure that you're just applying the things that it needs to be successful as a complete piece, instead of being kind of tied into like an order of operations And I think an order of operations works on a lot of things. I'm not saying that that's like not a way to paint or whatever. That's definitely a way that I paint. It's definitely a way that people should paint. People have great success working that way. All I'm saying is that for something like skin, I think sometimes being able to just kind of monitor the overall progress and isolate what's needed where can be way more effective at producing something that looks interesting and developed. It can be, you know, if you tend to find that your skin workups are very sort of monotone and very kind of, you know, not particularly alive, then a great way to remedy that is to maybe break out of working in a set order of operations and instead go more for a method like this, where you know, work apart, adjust, step back, look at the whole, work apart, adjust. One of the things that I've spotted, for example, that I'm really not happy with is the level of highlight on this second portion of eye is just way too high. So I can just pull that down, and then inevitably it gets a bit too saturated. So now I can just bring sort of some of my tans in and just calm it. And then start to work lighter again. And then start to integrate into the area around it. I'll just give that a second to dry. And we'll modify it a bit more. But he's starting to look pretty good, huh? We've only been working on him for like a little over an hour. I'm kind of 50-50 on that, to be honest, Joe. I might put this one up for sale and then do another one, because I want to do one for Jen, because Jen loves Game of Thrones. But I maybe don't want my first one to be for Jen, so I might put this one up for sale. If I can find a sculptor degree, I could do that. They'd certainly be nice as, like, bookends or something, wouldn't they? So I am going to be pulling this back up, if you're wondering why it looks a bit weird at the moment, but I'm trying to tone it first, so that I can see how much it needs to come back up by. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Yeah, Jen's a big Jon Snow fan.